hardest chess puzzle in the world for those rated under 1250 ELO. Welcome back to this series where we're going through each ELO's hardest puzzle. Here's today's rating, here's today's pass rate. Pause the video now to see if you can do it. That was way too much time. Let's get into it. Now these puzzles are just getting harder and harder, and this one is a real doozy. Some people might see that the light squared bishop is on the same diagonal as the queen and the rook, and therefore trying to attack the pawn on f3. Some people might be focusing on sacrificing this rook on g8, because they're used to giving checks straight away. And some of you might even be thinking of thematic attacks, like doubling up your rooks, or pushing a pawn to attack the pin. So how do you know which idea to try out? Because there are so many ideas, unfortunately we just have to brute force this. So let's take this one by one and get through them. Now remember the lesson that we had on tempo and time. It's really important that we now work out what our plan is. Is it to go and checkmate the king, or is it to just try and win material? Well, checkmating the king would be the one that's most threatening to the opponent, so let's start with that. So if we want to checkmate the king in this position, we need to start focusing on the opponent's positional weaknesses. Now what are they? Well, a positional weakness is usually induced because your pawn structure is not stable, especially if it's in front of the king. So we need to work out how our pieces can work together as a team to attack that weakness. And as we can see in this position, the real weakness is on g2 and f2. Let's fully go back to basics and count the number of defenders and attackers on the g2 square. Well, it's defended once and twice. And we're attacking it once, twice, and thrice. So we're getting somewhere. We've established that we can take this pawn if we wanted to. But the question is, what will be left at the end of the sequence? Suppose that we started by taking with the rook. Well, the opponent's just going to take back with the pawn, and now we're in trouble because if we do take with the bishop, they're not forced to take back, and we've just lost the rook for no reason. So we definitely can't start with taking the rook. But let's start with taking the bishop. If the bishop was to take and then the pawn were to take back, well now the rook comes with a lot more power. Will the knight necessarily take back? And remember the theme of bringing all our pieces together. Another idea that we spotted at the very beginning was that there's a light square weakness on f2. So if our bishop was to take it, now the rook is also defending it. So the bishop is actually delivering a check, which is a fork, which would win the queen. Which means if we were to take the pawn on g3 with the rook, then the knight would have to take back, otherwise it would lose its queen. And at this point we know that we had more attackers than defenders, and finally our queen would come into the attack, forcing their queen to block. And then we could deliver mate. Now some of you might rightly be asking, what happens if the queen doesn't block? Well, in this case remember the queen would also be attacking the pawn on f3, and so the bishop would also come in and deliver another check, winning the queen. Now that we know that that was the sequence that we needed to play, we can take the pawn on g3. That's all the puzzle expected from us, because at this level you're not expected to know that full sequence of ideas, but I just wanted to share that with you just to give you an idea of how you can bring all your pieces together in these puzzles. Now for a 1250 rated ELO puzzle, don't try and tell me that was easy. We really are bringing the hardest puzzles at each ELO. I'll see you tomorrow for a 1500 rated puzzle.